Hello, and welcome to another edition of Goblin Lore Podcast. Today we have the second of our Patreon episodes. This episode is brought to us by Zach Libner. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. Do you?
Libner?
Zach Leubner, which is at Zach _ SHWAP, WAP, who...
As in Fetty.
Schwap?
As in Fetty Wap.
Okay.
That's a reference the kids will get.
Is it? Okay, the kids will get that.
I'm just doing this for our SEO.
Okay. At Zach _ Schwap, who is one of our Patreons and one of our one of the first Patreon supporters that we had.
And a real life friend of the cast.
Real life friend of the cast, stayed at my house. Him and his significant other, Jen, they stayed here during the GP Minneapolis. It was awesome. I actually had a lot of fun with them. So Zach had suggested we came to him with ideas. And after giving me very long, thought out, wonderful ideas for just philosophical episodes, he also decided to give us a Goblin Games because I kind of asked him to. And what he came up with was sauces in the magic world. So tonight we're getting saucy.
That's right.
So let's introduce ourselves and let's start off with what is one of your favorite sauces when it comes to cooking or eating? Once again, I'm Hobbskew. I can be found on Twitter at Hobbskew. And I am going to go with one that is on our list later, so we'll come back to it, but it is Worcestershire sauce. And not just because most Americans can't pronounce it correctly.
You have to specify not just.
Yes, fair enough.
And since I started talking, I might as well go. I'm Alex, found on Twitter at AlexanderNewM. And one of my favorite sauces, I'm going to go with like a sweet chili sauce. I've had a few different versions, but I like most of them I've had because it's got some sweet, it's got some spice to it. It's a good balance. I don't really cook with it. I've tried and it was not good because then all the sweet cooks off and all you have left is the hot. But it's a nice dipping sauce, a nice topping sauce.
Ooh, wow! I didn't think about topping sauces. I'm changing mine to hot fudge.
Oh, now we can't get into the philosophy of sauces yet. Hold on, because there's so many. We've got so many savory sauces, and now you're jumping in here with some dessert stuff. Pause on that. I'm Joe Redeman. You can find me on Twitter at Findhorn. That's FYND Horn. And I have to stay with my very German heritage here and say that I really love stone ground mustard, like stone ground brown mustard, where you still have the little globules of mustard seeds in there. Oh, it's so good on like a bratwurst. That and a brat and like a pretzel bun. That's baseball season to me. That's all over the summer for me.
When you said the German heritage, I thought you were just going to say that your sauce was butter.
They do love their butter.
Yeah.
And the first thing in my thought was just a nice thick brown gravy, which we will also get to later.
Spoilers.
So many teases.
So before we get to all of that stuff that we've teased and the things that we haven't had an opportunity to tease, I was thinking a good sort of baseline place to start is I came up with what I feel is a solid color pie philosophy for sauces. It's kind of threw together fairly quick, so I think there might be some tweaks and maybe some overlaps that aren't perfect. But I want to run down this for you too, and then maybe we can use this as a base for our conversation going forward if you two agree with this.
Nice use of base there.
Yeah,
because sauces are generally bases for meals.
That's right. That's a nice food pun, which is timely with Eldraine going on. So let's start Wooburg order. We're going with white. What I got down is the white sauces that are white are kind of for the masses. They're things that are consistent. They're things that are easy. Maybe to use or maybe to more easily digestible. I don't know. I'm just kind of spitballing things there. So blue, I think the important thing there is it's kind of something that's for the masses and something that's more consistent. Blue, I think, are going to be things that have a lot of pieces put together. They're much more manufactured sauces. They're not trying to highlight a specific natural ingredient. They're trying to build them into something different that is I don't know, more manufactured. That's kind of the keyword that I had, at least. Black, I think you're looking at flavor at all costs. Things.
So black can do anything that all the other flavors can do.
See, and this is where one of the difficulty comes. So in red, I have, whatever tastes best, reckless, abandon, and trying to come up with a different where that line is between black and red. Okay. I think it's red is a little more reckless in the moment.
So like whereas spice and punch.
Yeah, something that really hits you. Whereas black might be less concerned about the long-term consequences of the sauce, of consuming this
calories
sauce.
Or
exactly
digestion or okay.
Yeah, so that's kind of my thought there. If that makes sense with those two.
Yep.
And then green is kind of the opposite of blue. I think green are probably sauces with fewer ingredients, more natural things, something that highlights a specific natural ingredient and is trying to have minimal changes and impact on it.
Oh, okay.
So like honey might be not to name sauces before we get there, but
yeah, like honey is not is used like a sauce sometimes, but I think that's a good example because that's one where a lot of times it's literally just that single ingredient.
Yep.
You're trying to use this natural thing. You want as little, human impact on it as you can.
I mean, it sounds like green's goal is to bring out the actual flavor of whatever it's going on. So it's to enhance the specific, just natural tendency or flavor of the meat or the dish. Versus some of these others are really the sauce is kind of an actual second ingredient almost.
Yeah,
layering.
Yeah, and that's a further implication that I didn't really think about either is how the sauce impacts the dish, not just how the sauce itself is.
Yeah.
So colorless is definitely just water, right?
Yes.
Cool. Just making sure.
Yeah.
So, Alex, with setting us up with that, I really appreciate that. That's a great way for us to even start.
Awesome.
With a philosophy.
Starting it off, why don't we take some of the more common, at least American condiments that we might find in people's fridges across this nation, and let's start with maybe the most basic one, ketchup.
All right. I think this is pretty straightforward. I know, Hobbs, you and I were talking about this, and I think you actually got this suggestion from someone else, but I think white is actually a really good color for that.
Zach, when he suggested the list to us, straight up said ketchup is white.
Yep. And that conversation kind of helped me start this color pie philosophy, because that's the thing. We were trying to figure out, well, what, would this be? Because there's all the things, but it's like ketchup, at least for Americans, it's the basic thing. Almost every, any restaurant that serves like American quote unquote food is going to have ketchup.
Sitting at the table.
Sitting at the table. Yeah, it's a common thing.
Yeah.
There is variations, but the difference in those variations is much smaller than the variations in some of these other sauces.
Yeah.
So it's a thing where you're going to have that consistency. It's a common thing that people can use.
Even
you know what you're going to get.
Yeah. You know,
and even down to brand too, like 99% of the time, if it's not like store brand, I'm seeing, Heinz. Like everyone has Heinz ketchup.
That's true. And speaking of, Heinz being everywhere and this being the common thing for the masses, it's consistent and everywhere. I'd like to already go on a mini tangent. So it's a lot like, food chains. And I think fast food chains kind of, they get shit on a lot because the food quality isn't very high. Like, that's kind of the point of it. Fast food is low quality. Like, that's kind of the point of it. But it's a consistent thing, and I think it's often looked down on. And I want to talk about that. When we're talking about ketchup, that just because it's a lower quality and it's a common thing that lots of people know of, that doesn't make it bad. There is a place for these things. Because there's a consistency, you always know you can go in and find something. If you're traveling and you don't know the area, you can go to these fast food places and know what to expect, and that there is a important value in society for that. And so these, we talk about ketchup, and I think it gets looked down upon a lot. But the thing is, there is a value to those things. Maybe they're not valuable to you, and that is totally fine. But it is important that society has those things for people to have the consistency of experience. If they need something, they know they can go find this.
I mean, and let's be honest, what else are you going to put on your French fries?
Yeah, mayo. But
Mayo?
I mean, like
Vinegar?
Yeah, there's usually
Weird if you do.
better places to eat.
Yeah,
you don't
we
always
just alienated an entire continent. You know that, right?
Yeah, no. and in all
the mayo or the vinegar part?
Both.
Okay, because I think we could aim for 2 continents if we really want.
I mean, if we really want to alienate them, I'll just tell y'all, when I go to Five Guys, I put vinegar in my ketchup, and it's amazing.
You just alienated.
The face I just got from Hobbs is worth not being on the casting.
So I think we'll leave the cast with you. We're leaving.
Oh, there we go. All right.
I guess since we mentioned it, mayo is maybe the next best one here.
Yeah.
And mayonnaise is I think this is one that, man, I have a little bit of an issue between white, because it feels, at least that's the stereotype, that's the joke of it being so for the masses, but I think that's maybe also a white people thing, is the mayonnaise being common.
Yep.
I also feel like it a little bit is blue, because there's a lot going on in it to keep the texture between, like, I think it's egg white and all sorts of things to keep, like, the elasticity. That's not a great word you want for your sauces, but you know what I'm talking about.
Well, it's used as an emulsifier. I mean,
that's it. Emulsification.
You have the whole thing of the proteins, the lectin, it's the egg yolk. You have emulsifiers that are basically doing. This is one that there is a little bit more variation in, because it can be the base for other sauces. Mm-hmm. So it could be the starting point, which I don't know if that takes it more into a green realm.
I think that I like blue for that, because that actually takes it further away from highlighting natural ingredients. You're taking these ingredients even further from their natural sort of nature, and you're combining them to create something new and different. Also, if you just listen to all the words that Hobbs just used, that sounded very blue. When you throw the word emulsify out, you're just treading on that blue color pie almost immediately.
I agree with that. Yes.
Because this is something that I guess it brings us into the realm, and I think that this is where blue does come into it, is there is overlap here between another sauce that's on the list. So I'm just going to bring it up right now, which is aiolis.
Mm-hmm.
Because a typical aioli is a garlic sauce with olive oil, and other regions use emulsifiers. And I think that in general, aioli is oftentimes now used across the board is kind of an emulsifier type base with flavors and different seasonings. This is what people make, like you can get like a tomato aioli, or you can get there's just tons of, I hate aiolis too. So I don't know all of them, but I mean, they're used as dipping sauces. They're used for flavor. So
at the fancy burger joint or whatever, that's what you're going to get with your French fries.
Yeah.
That's the thing where you order I know this is going to be another trigger for you, Hobbs, but you order a California burger and it might come with aioli on it.
We should clarify for all of the people out there who are not from Minnesota and are therefore much more normal, that in this weird state, a California burger, if you see it on the menu across the state, and I had to find this out after I saw it for the second or third time, because I figured it was just some weird restaurant in the middle of nowhere, but a California burger comes with tomato, lettuce, and mayo.
Isn't that all that you eat in California? Those 3 things?
Where I'm from, in California, I guess we do just call that a burger. So there is an argument to be made there. But I would say
Case
that
rested.
most of America would not call that a California burger. Most things that I associate with the word California in food include avocado.
I just call that a millennial burger.
Yeah, see, I remember when I was young and my dad worked at Denny's, I think that was before avocados were invented, or at least before they reached the Midwest. Like, so
they're actually a Simic invention. Most people
No.
don't know this.
we didn't know that they existed. So the best we could come up with was that must have been mayo and lettuce. That's why it looked green and it was creamy. That's my theory, anyway.
Where the tomato comes from, it's a fresh fruit veggie. We don't know what the difference is.
Yeah, it's California is lettuce and tomato because we don't have vegetables in the Midwest. We have carrots, we have potatoes, and we have cows.
Yeah,
And I mean, technically we have corn, but that's mostly for the cows.
right.
And we shove all our emotions down underneath the second bun. That's it. We won't get there.
So because I'm reading through this list, I am struggling to find a green in at least this initial list. I'm going to add one and say that avocado or guacamole actually is one.
Guacamole is a very good one.
Because you don't want a lot to it. Most people, the simpler the guacamole I like guacamole that tastes like avocado. I do not like guacamole that has overly onion, garlic, salt, anything else. The avocado should shine, and then the avocado is used to bring out whatever is you're eating, because it's a very different texture, it's a very different flavor, but it's made to complement because it is kind of a muted flavor overall. So that wasn't our list, but mashed up avocado, I'm firmly putting in the green camp.
And I don't do a lot of avocado or guacamole, but from what I understand, when you do add ingredients, usually it's like tomato, onion, lime juice. You're putting things directly into it. You're not working those ingredients. You mix them in. And I think that's a very green philosophy for preparing sauces.
Yep.
Honestly, my philosophy with guacamole is just like the chips are merely a conveyance device to bring the guacamole to my face. That's all I want, because the guacamole, should be that simple but elegant.
Right. Yep. So it is kind of a sauce because it is more of a topping. Like I said, and that's what I think that is where it's kind of made its way places, is it's now served on something like a burger.
Yep. And there's some sauces that we have on the list that I'll make some arguments for them being green or them being green and another color potentially.
Okay.
As we get there. Yeah. It's Hobbs repping green, making sure
really worried for my color
represented there.
Okay, so let's take another one of these.
Yeah, how about another one here? Let's move off of the sort of gelatinous substances and maybe into something a little more challenging and different here. I want to see what you guys think of soy sauce.
Okay, so that is an interesting one. So what I want to preface this by saying, in America, we say soy sauce and tend to think like Kikkoman, one brand, one type of soy sauce that's sitting in the Chinese restaurants, and that's what exists. There's a lot. There is a lot of different soy sauces prepared in a lot of different ways. It's a major thing in Asian culture. I know, particularly like China, Japan, there's a lot going on there, and other Asian cultures around there that I know even less about. I want to say, I don't know a lot about the preparation of it, but I think there is some green to the element. Like it's an important ingredient, but there's a lot of things that are done with it. Like something that I've been exploring lately, I found there's a really great Asian market around here in the Twin Cities, is ponzu, which is soy sauce and citrus. So I found a
No. That's a red green land destruction deck.
No, that's ponzu.
Got it.
It's very subtle difference.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm with you now.
One is a modern deck. The other one has lemon juice and soy sauce and is fantastic. Well, there's a few versions.
Wait, of the deck or the sauce?
Both, actually.
Great.
So that would be my argument. I think there's some green to it because of, I don't know. That's kind of an instinct, and I don't know that I have a lot of of evidence to back this up, but it feels like the preparation of it, especially when I, learn about a little bit about some of the like craft soy sauces and things that places that have been like. I don't know a lot about alcohol either, but I hear people talk about craft soy sauce and with a lot of the same vocabulary that they talk about like Scotch and single malt liquor and single barrel things. There are types of soy sauce like that, and I don't know much about it. I learned about it a little bit at Kitchen Window, this like cooking class when I went and did a sushi class there. That's also where I was introduced to ponzu, and I'm very glad for that. But I'm interested in what you two have to say here.
There's a lot of chemical reactions that are involved in the process of making soy sauce. So at its base, it is soybeans, and across kind of the cultures. Now, it traditionally is done by fermenting those. So I can see a green part to that. Like fermentation is a natural process that occurs. It has that green feel in the sense that it is, I mean, think of it like kind of brewing beer, like you're letting it take its natural course, but there still is kind of that cool scientific part where you get to talk about molds and funguses like aspergillus and say how that's related to the yeast. But it is a fermentation process, which by itself is actually a pretty natural process. I would completely agree with you on this one and put it in green.
Okay. Do you think mono green? Do you think there's enough to argue for a Simic here?
I think that this is something that could be done on kind of its own. It doesn't require that lab type thing. I mean,
that's fair.
They're chemical sauces kind of commercially, probably, as most of these are when we get talking about them. But at its core, it's a fermented sauce. I actually am fine with this being a mono green.
I think, too, in terms of how it's used and employed, that, it doesn't tend to be a sauce that takes over something. It augments, dishes and that sort of thing too. And so again, it's bringing out the natural flavors of a dish. And that's one thing too that I've heard when I've gone out for sushi with people is the chefs will say, don't use the soy sauce on your sushi, or don't use too much because you don't want it to overpower. It's not supposed to knock out the flavor of the fish. It's supposed to help bring out that flavor.
Yeah, which is fair, because one of the other things I learned in that class is, by and large, and this was again sushi, so they're talking about Japanese. I don't know how much this ranges for other cultures in Asia, but in the U.S., in Western cultures, we tend to put salt into our food. We put that we cook it into the food. Whereas in Japan, they tend to put less of it and then you add it later. And that's what soy sauce is to sushi usually. That is where you're putting the salt into the dish. And anyone who has done a lot of cooking or has played around with things will know that salt on its own doesn't really have a flavor. I mean, if you put too much, there's a sodiumness to it. But what it does is it enhances flavors. A little bit of salt in something, you will taste the flavor of that thing more intensely.
Right. Yeah. I was just listening to something about MSG, and it's the same sort of thing. It's a flavor enhancer.
And while we're on MSG, we could use this to kind of dispel. I think this would be a good time to actually bring up. It's a seasoning. We're talking sauces, but we're just on a seasoning kick right now. Friend of the cast, Tappy Toeclaws, posted a mini thread. So go back and you can find it on MSG. I've had this discussion with other friend of the class whose Twitter handle, I don't know what it is now. Kilnfiend Potter?
Yes.
Baleful Strix previously. She and I have talked about this idea that MSG has kind of a racist bent to it because it was used predominantly
the perception of it.
The perception of it. Yes, not the actual spice itself. The actual spice itself is actually very amazing. It is something that I've cooked with for a very long time, actually, in rubs for meat. Anybody who's ever eaten at my house and had the barbecue that we make at the GP Minneapolis, you had MSG in it.
Right.
And people at the spice rub that I got came from the oil fields that my dad worked in, and they would not tell people that it had MSG in it when serving it, because if they didn't, lo and behold, randomly, nobody had headaches or any of the side effects that people complained about that they say came with MSG and what the reputation of MSG was. And what it's been is that it was basically a way to kind of keep people from certain Asian food markets, especially in the United States. And MSG, if I remember rightly, is technically in the class of the sixth flavor.
Umami, yes.
Umami. It's technically separate from kind of the salty. It is more of the umami flavor. So
fifth flavor, we should say.
Fifth flavor.
Yes.
Sweet, savory, sour.
Because savory is umami.
Okay.
Yep.
There we go.
So sweet, sour, bitter, salty, savory, which is umami.
Sure, we're there. We got it. 5. But it's interesting to go read that if you have not read any of the literature on it. Just as a FYI, it's very interesting to read because MSG adds amazing flavor to meat. It's actually, once again, it's a flavor enhancer. It's meant to bring out the flavor of things like meat.
Yeah, it's naturally contained in so many things. It's not even just like a lab created thing. It sounds, when you say monosodium glutamate, you're like, that's made in a lab. That's a factory thing. No. This is in stuff. I don't remember. Big shout out to the Stuff You Should Know podcast, because this is where I learned about this stuff. But it is contained, I believe, in seaweed. I think that's one of the places, and that specifically is where it was sort of discovered, where when umami was discovered or identified, that was one of the places, I believe, where it was identified as a big component. So, anywho, that's a thing I didn't even know we would learn today.
Always learning moment. Apparently, it is found naturally, too, in tomatoes, grapes, cheeses, and mushrooms.
That's it. Tomatoes is what I remembered. Yes.
Yeah. It is the sodium salt of glutamic acid.
Yes. I learned that tomatoes have a lot of glutamic acid in it, and I learned that from an anime.
And glutamic acid has nothing to do with gluten.
That's also right.
It's true. No, it's true. That's actually something people... Cobbs is shaking his head at me, but that's actually something people think. So, boom.
Because it sounds similar, but no, very different. All right,
While we're talking about gluten, let's move on to gravy. Is there gluten in gravy? I feel like there is.
Well, you add a thickening agent.
Yep.
Which is usually roux, or not, you add a thickening agent, which is flour and water usually. You can add others, and there's also non-glutinous flours, but in the US, if we're adding a flour, it's probably wheat flour, unless specified otherwise, and that makes it glutinous. I think that's how you conjugate that word.
It does. The other big one that I think of in the US, though, is cornstarch.
Oh, that's fair.
We love our corn here.
That is fair, and it depending on where you are.
Yeah.
At least for me growing up, it was always flour. That's what
me too.
What my dad used to thicken it, but that is a good point. So I think I'm thinking gravy is kind of black in the color pie. When I was talking about flavor at all costs, the thing where you're less concerned about the future implications. that sounds gravy.
That sounds like gravy.
Yeah.
I think part of that difference too between black and red is black almost has more of that rich, as we're talking about it, umami sort of feel to it, whereas red might be just maybe more adventurous. So like black has a certain luxuriousness, and gravy definitely takes like a good cut of meat and makes it like, oh, that's a dish.
Yeah, well, and
depending, but.
Yeah, and gravy, by and large, especially like the meat gravies I like this meat so much, I'm going to take all the meat that cooked out of the meat and put it into a sauce to put back onto the meat.
Yeah.
It's a meat hack for the meat.
Because in, Orzhov sense, that meat can't escape. Even the juice being cooked out of the meat cannot escape this dish.
Yeah, I mean, we're taking the fats, we're bringing it back in. If my chicken fried steak doesn't come with an extra side of gravy, I am not a happy person. I mean, this is the most black of the ones we've done so far to me.
Yeah.
100%. One of my favorite gravy memories. This should be
you
a recurring.
Have so many of them.
Yeah, this should be a recurring segment on the show. Gravy memories.
Gravy memories.
As a proud German, he has many great gravy memories.
My family, every Christmas would make a ham, and this is something my wife ridicules me for constantly because ham is only an Easter thing, whatever. Oh, I'm sorry. No, Thanksgiving ham. That's the difference. That's why she makes fun of me.
Your wife is correct. Okay.
But not only would my parents make turkey gravy to go on the Thanksgiving turkey, they would make ham gravy because they would also roast like pineapples on the outside and rub the ham in brown sugar. And so all that fat cooks off and automatically mixes with the pineapple juice. And that gravy is the single greatest liquid that has ever touched my face.
I have just come back from dinner and now I'm hungry. So we need to take a break. So I can figure out how to make some ham gravy out of whatever the hell I have in my
So, I mean, this kind of gets into this interesting regional thing too, because that actually is more similar to what like a red eye gravy, which is very different than say a brown gravy or a cream gravy. Red eye gravy is specifically drippings from ham that's usually fried, but it's also a pan that's deglazed with coffee.
Ooh.
And doesn't use a separate thickening agent. I mean, you guys actually probably were making more of a brown, but it brings up that red eye gravy is a gravy that a lot of people do not know about, even within the U.S. And that's why I think the thing is interesting. It's normally served over ham, grits, or biscuits, but I do like it's got the deglaze of coffee with it too.
That sounds like that could be almost a red-black Rakdos style because you're getting punched in the face by caffeine.
You're putting caffeine into your gravy. That's Rakdos all the way.
Yeah, I mean, they are the roasters on our Ravnica coffee shop. That's a callback to an old episode.
Was it
what we're doing now?
Was it a Rakdos thing when someone put caffeine into bacon?
What?
Is that a thing, or did my brain make that up? Because I'm pretty sure I've seen caffeinated bacon.
I hope that's a thing. That sounds incredible.
I need to Google search this.
You look that up. While we're talking about my holiday memories and my best gravy experiences, can we also tackle the other Hollandaise condiment on this list, which is cranberry sauce?
This is another one that I think it depends on the construction, because there's a very non-green version of this, but I think the one that is mostly actual cranberries has green elements in the color pie.
I agree with that. I think where you get more into it's cranberry in a can that's sort of the jellied, jiggly mass that still holds the shape of the can.
Okay, Hobbs, where are you going? Because I think
I'm pushing this into white.
That's what I was thinking.
Okay, so sort of mass-produced.
Mm-hmm.
You know what you're going to get if you go to the store and you buy a can of cranberry sauce.
Yep, okay. And that's a thing that, within, a certain section of everybody, knows what that is. When you say cranberry sauce for Thanksgiving in the U.S., a lot of people, that's one of their first thoughts.
Most may not have ever had an actual cranberry sauce.
Mm-hmm. And even the people who have actual cranberry sauces, they'll think of that maybe, in a more dismissive way. But that is definitely going to be a thought that a lot of people share.
So even at Thanksgivings I've gone to with traditional cooked cranberry sauce with whole cranberries in it, there usually is an expectation that there is a can of cranberry sauce there.
Wow. Okay.
I expect that there's going to be one. Even if I go to a really nice, a fancy Thanksgiving dinner, every meal is I don't know, the turkey spatchcocked, which is just, how a style of cooking it quicker. I mean, if I'm thinking of kind of fancier ones, there still needs to be a can of cranberry sauce, so you can hear it.
Do you think Garrick spatchcocks his turkeys?
I mean, it is an effective way to cook. It cooks much quicker. It depends on if Garrick is on the run.
Gotcha. So, no. He doesn't.
No, he takes the time to cook his turkey. He roasts it. Now, traditional cranberry sauce, there is an element, once again, of blue, because you need to cook the cranberries to a certain point and there is kind of this degree of, you want them to start popping. You don't want them to go too far. So there is an element kind of where you're thickening and you're basically changing things into sugars. And there's kind of that element when you're cooking it that, yes, you can crock pot it, but you do need to be watching. You don't want like when the cranberries pop, you're kind of at the point where you need to be making it. You don't want them to go beyond.
Why don't we do a sort of a lightning round? Quick descriptions of a couple of these and quick takes.
Okay,
so
hot takes.
Mustard, Hobbs, Alex, then me for this.
Literally the worst thing in the world, and I put that in colorless. I have no reasoning.
Heinz yellow mustard is definitely white. But then there's other mustards that I think maybe more green. So maybe it's a Selesnya thing, and there's some that fall in different ranges.
Yeah, I agree with you on Heinz on yellow mustard. There's definitely some green ones. I think like the spicy brown and like some of those craft mustards can stray into red. So
I could see that.
Yeah.
They're about hitting you with flavor a lot of times. It's
just the spice factor. It's the punch.
Yep.
Okay.
All right, ranch.
For no reason at all, my first instinct was Selesnya. I don't know why. Green, white. To be honest, it probably isn't terribly green. I think you're probably there might be more black or blue because I think you're trying to process it. You're not highlighting natural ingredients. You're trying to put something different.
Yeah, I think ranch is really meant to kind of. It's not. To me, it is adding flavor to bland things. It is not trying to let that food shine on its own.
Right. Mm-hmm. It's supposed to smother your salad and make it so that you can, get it down your gullet if you don't like lettuce. I'd say it's like white blue Azorius maybe.
Yeah.
It does not feel lawful at all. That should be a
Hey, but just like I said in a recent episode that I don't think has aired yet, the Ravnica's representation of the guilds is great, but are only one representation of how those color combinations work. And you can have something that's definitely blue-white that is not Azorius.
That's fair. And I always do struggle with that naming convention that we now default to any two-color combination as...
Oh, yeah. Well, I just did it earlier when I said Ranch Selesnya to start with. And it's like, well, that... Yeah.
Yeah.
Steak sauce. Like A1 steak sauce is, I guess, what I'm assuming this means. I'm going, I think a little bit black... because it's rich and it's, sort of got a whole bunch of flavors going on. But I do think there is some blue to this too, because there's no one flavor or no one component.
Mm-hmm.
I have this as white. I think of this as being kind of a way to just add flavor to a steak and I like A1 sauce or steak sauce at times, but I do think it hides some of the flavor of the meat, but it's in a way that that it's always going to be available at every restaurant that you go to add some sort of a tangy punch to your steak.
Okay. I don't know. I don't really use the sauce. I think those are both have some compelling arguments, and I'm going to abstain on this one.
Okay.
Sriracha.
Red.
Yep. Moving on. Tomato.
This is the first that we've had of kind of the more of the kind of just hot sauce. And I do think that in some ways, hot sauce in this shape and form that we're talking about is really, to me, the color pie of red. It is about hitting you in the face. A really good hot sauce. Now, a good hot sauce should have flavor underneath it. And I want to equate the fact that I'm not talking about just spice. Because really spicy food without flavor is not actually good. Most Mexican food that you try, the really hot for the sake of hot is not good, but sriracha is meant to be hot, punch you in the face, and have flavor, and that's red.
Yep. And I think if I can transition off of that. I think there are other types of hot sauce that are a little more green. That might be more red green, because there's some there's a Louisiana hot sauce that I like to use that has literally 3 ingredients. Yes. It is vinegar, it is peppers, and it is cayenne peppers, and it is salt. And I think that's a green construction of a sauce. Okay. You're like, we're going to give you one ingredient, and we're going to highlight this one ingredient.
Yep. And I would say that's exactly what I was thinking, is very vinegary hot sauces could be red green. I don't know that there's is Tabasco maybe the white, but nah, that's sort of a cultural thing more so than it actually being. I think hot sauce in and of itself tends to be kind of niche. So
I mean, we're talking a little of the brands that you might find in the store. So like, you're gonna find like
they're going to edge towards more ubiquitous anyway.
yeah.
All right then. Tomato. And honestly, I don't have a big difference between tomato sauce and marinara sauce. There's obviously a slight flavor difference, but to me the construction of them isn't so different that I would really differentiate them.
And maybe this is just my background of things. Like, I think of marinara as a tomato sauce as a base sauce. It is simply tomato from which you do things. Like, my dad would put, cans of tomato sauce in chili. That was a part of the liquid component for his chili. Or you can use that tomato sauce to build a marinara. You can use it to build all sorts of other tomato-based things. And I think that's where the variation or the difference comes in.
Mm-hmm. And I think that was what I would say too. Like, it depends on what you mean by tomato sauce here. If you simply just mean mashed up tomatoes, in some ways, it is the base. It's going to then be. And for all of our UK people, when we say tomato sauce, we do not mean what we would call ketchup, because it is called tomato there. Like, that's what they refer to ketchup as.
And for color pie, I'm thinking maybe green blue, because it's green. Tomato on its own. The base tomato sauce is a green presentation. You're using one ingredient, but you're kind of I don't know that you use it on its own very often. You're using it to build into something else.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And I would say that the building in is also, once again, dependent on these are sauces that correctly making a good, even just pasta sauce, and let's say marinara, you should be cooking this for hours.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you want those flavors to be cooking in. You want this going slow. When I make these from scratch, I would start with like crushed up tomatoes, and I want those tomatoes to break down. And I want the spices and the basil to get a chance to basically infuse in with it. This is quote unquote a simic, green blue in general, but even more so just kind of simic-y to me.
Yeah.
Let's go real quick around the horn then on the last few, and then I've got one mystery one here at the end that I want to puzzle over.
Okay.
Hobbs, au jus.
Au jus is green.
Interesting.
Au jus is really made to just add some moisture back into a meat. It's basically the flavor that kind of comes with it, maybe some salt. But it really is made to just kind of give some moisture to the meat for me.
Okay. Alex, hollandaise.
I think that's more blue. That's one that you're putting a lot of technique into it. You're putting a lot of things. You're not highlighting a natural ingredient. You're combining stuff to build into something different. I mean, hollandaise is the one that I was thinking of when I was writing this color pie out for blue.
All right. Hobbs, Worcestershire.
Worcestershire should be white because it should be used in everything. It is so amazing. I mean, I'm being serious here. Worcestershire sauce is not one that's typically used in America. A lot of people have heard of it, but don't really know what it is. It's another fermented liquid condiment. So in some ways, it actually is similar it's more of a vinegar base flavored with. Alex and I were talking about this a couple weeks ago. Like, it's got anchovies, it's got tamarind, it's got onion, garlic, seasonings. So it's got every flavor in. Now, interestingly, it was created by chemists. So I'm going blue.
All right.
Yeah, two chemists, the ones Lee and Perrins, who have the famous brand that if you've ever seen the bottles of Worcestershire sauce with paper around them, that's Lee and Perrins.
Wild. I did not realize they were chemists.
Yeah.
Alex, Alfredo.
Alfredo. Yeah, I want to say there's some black element. This seems like a heavy sauce. This has a very denseness to it. I'm not sure if this is mono black. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I feel like it's definitely black. There's maybe an element of white to it in the sense that, like, you go to any sort of Italian restaurant, you can get like fettuccine Alfredo. You go to any noodle restaurant, you can get fettuccine Alfredo.
Now I will say that I expect to vary though more from restaurant to restaurant.
Sure, and that's where I would say like, yeah, maybe it's not exactly that. So I think then you get into, okay, there's no one sort of flavor that comes out of it. It's kind of an amalgamation of a ton of stuff. Maybe you get into blue black a little. It's a Demir sort of thing, but I don't know.
See, I was saving the blue black for one of the next ones. I do think that Alfredo is probably more of just a decadent sauce when you want something that's flavorful, heavy, and you know you're probably going to feel crappy later when it hits your stomach, but it was worth it because it has such amazing, great flavor. So the last one that we're going to do is bechamel sauce. Now,
what in the world is that?
So bechamel sauce is a white sauce. I mean, it simply is a roux, butter, and flour, milk. Now, it's interesting because a lot of times, like if you actually go to look up something like white sauce and you mean Alfredo, it's going to redirect you to bechamel because bechamel is a lot of times a base for kind of more complex sauces. Now, I am still keeping it blue because of the fact is bechamel sauces are really, they take technical skill. You do not want them to break. You do not want to end up with lumps in them. This is something that you are really trying to bring different flavors into. A lot of time you are infusing different flavors into a bechamel sauce to use for, it is kind of they call it a mother sauce. And that is because it's used so much in French cuisine. So this is kind of your standout all-star for French cuisine, which I think of as being that technical kind of cooking. Now, this is where I was going to say, though, it is such a rich, beautiful, flavorful, buttery, and milk and dairy-based sauce that I kind of move this into blue black, into the Demir category.
Interesting. Okay.
More so than Alfredo. Because for one thing, the Alfredo, like I said, I know what that is. I'm going to see it everywhere. Blue black to me really stands out as being a complex and a sauce you're not going to get everywhere.
I can respect that, especially because I still cannot tell what this thing is, even though I've Googled an image of it. So the last thing that we have is curry. And Alex, you had a particular idea on this specifically. Do you want to explain why we're sort of leaving this one for last?
Yeah. I wanted to. So going through this list, we've had this list for a little while, just kind of pouring over, kind of trying to come up with some idea to actually prepare for the cast and come in and talk about it. And this is one that I was stuck on, because curry, generally in the US, and I think more Western cultures, we might have a specific idea of what we mean when we say curry, but it's not a sauce. It's not a single thing. It is a large, umbrella term used for an entire class of cooking, because it's a spice. There's lots of different ways that it's done in different cultural elements, and there's so much culture behind it and difference that I don't think we can really characterize, curry as a single sauce and give it a single color pie thing.
I wouldn't feel comfortable. I mean, I fully admit that this was one that felt a little more difficult to do because of those implications, more so than even some of the ones that we've been clear about, like, well, in America.
Yes.
Curry is difficult to even do that with, to me.
Yeah. Both from a cultural standpoint, because I don't have any of the cultural knowledge to even begin to talk about that in a meaningful way. I know so little. But also it's not even just a sauce thing. It is a spice.
It's a dish.
It's a dish, but it's not even just a single dish. And I think an analogy that is an American analogy that I came up with is it's kind of like trying to talk about barbecue, and you use the word barbecue, and it means so many different things to different people in different places, and none of them are definitive barbecue. They are all in this thing. You have, maybe in the Midwest we think of, at least I would think of barbecue sauce first, and that's a thing. But even within barbecue sauce, you have mustard-based. You have all sorts of different types of sauces. But then there's, schools of barbecue that don't use sauce. They use dry rubs. You get the North Carolina versus South Carolina versus Texas styles. There's
versus
all
Kansas City versus there's so much.
Yeah, Kansas City. You get the very different types of sauces and techniques, and there's just too much there. I think, some of these we've talked about have a lot of variation. We'll talk about marinara can have a lot of variation, but the difference between, a marinara in one place and a marinara in another is much, much smaller than 2 barbecue sauces or 2 curry dishes. And I think for that reason, well, this was on the list we had to work from. So I want to acknowledge that this was a thing, but I don't think that this is one that we can really talk about in a meaningful way here.
There's kind of its own color pie within there. If we did get into it, I feel like we would have Shivam Bhatt back on the cast because one of the people that we know who is Indian and has some of the cultural experience. However, also there are so many variations on curry that we could really get into, and now I really want lamb sagwala.
Yeah,
and I want barbecue.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about brisket because my dad makes brisket, and it's so good. Tell you, man, when you brine something for 14 hours and then you smoke it for 15, and then you make a homemade barbecue sauce. Dang it, I'm hungry again. We're gonna have to stop. I have to get another meal.
That's our show. You can find the podcast at Goblin Lore Pod on Twitter, or email any questions, comments, or concerns to goblinlorepodcast@gmail.com. If you would like to support your friendly neighborhood gobslugs, you can do so at patreon.com/goblinlorepod. This episode of Goblin Lore was hosted by Hobbs Q, who you can find on Twitter at HobbsQ. This episode was written and co-hosted by Alex Newman, who you can find on Twitter at AlexanderNewM. Engineering, editing, and production for this episode by Joe Redeman, who you can find on Twitter at Findhorn. That's FYND Horn. Our music is by Wintergarten, who you can find at wintergarten.com. That's wintergatan.com. Logo by Stephen Raphael on Twitter at Stephen Raffle. Goblin Lore is a presentation of Hipsters of the Coast, which you can find at hipstersofthecoast.com or at hipstersmtg on Twitter. Thank you all for listening, and remember, goblins, like snowflakes, are only dangerous in numbers.